screen. Okay, and Wes, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. My name's Wesley. I'm with Miami DSA, pronouns he, him, and I was also one of the founding members of Miami Tenants Union as well. That's why helping with this training, along with Jerry.
I forgot to mention, yeah. So Wes and I were founding members of the Miami Tenants Union, doing work at the Annie Coleman Apartments, Lincoln Fields, and then what was it? Was
Uh,
it the 93rd Street Apartments? If I'm
yeah, you
okay.
remember? I was actually talking to Nucleus earlier, or like a little bit last
Oh,
month,
nice.
and I didn't realize he was there on that day. And I was like, wait, you were there? Because we just had so many people. I remember you being and a bunch of other people. I was like, Nucleus, you was
I did
there?
not remember Nucleus. Good for
Right?
him. I hope he's doing well. Nucleus Shelton, is he? He's. I know he's a union lead. Where is he now?
He was with AFL. He's now with SEIU 1991 at my place, literally the office next to me.
AFL's loss is SEIU's gain once again.
Yeah, yeah.
So there you go. Okay. All right. So we can get started. So I'll share my screen. Okay. How do I do this? Please stop. There we go. All right. So feel free to, I won't be able to see Stack, but just feel free to unmute yourself. I wanted to ask, for anyone who is brand new to tenant organizing, I wanted to ask, in your mind, when you hear the phrase tenant organizing, what is your conception of that phrase?
Can I chime in?
By all means.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it means like I envision gathering the tenants and I don't know, like a conference hall or something, and discussing to them, you know, I guess, and and sort of, I guess, educating them and you know, about their rights as tenants, to to encourage them to stand up to, you know, to the landlords and, you know, actual property owners, in order to advance their cause and their rights as tenants.
All right, very good. Anyone else? When you think of tenant organizing, what comes to mind? Don't don't let me think that nothing comes to mind if you showed up for a meeting on tenant organizing. You're all here.
Uh, I'll add one.
All right.
Like building the tenants' power collectively, like almost like an like an institution against capital, which I guess in this case is the landlord.
Yep. You're building a constituency among the tenants. Anyone else?
Aggie, also learning from the tenants what their high priorities are.
Mhm. Yeah. Anytime you're having to guess what someone else's priorities are, you're already on the wrong foot. You'll never know what someone wants more than that person themselves. So we'll start with a basic definition. So tenant organizing is the act of tenants becoming aware of themselves as a political constituency and building collective power with their neighbors to win more class autonomy and better living conditions. In other words, it's a political act. There's definitely aspects of like I think that was Ziv saying bringing people in to a meeting and talking amongst themselves, what we call note checking, which is people sharing their stories and talking about common issues that they're facing, and then other residents becoming aware that they were not the only ones facing that issue, and then coming up with a strategy of how to put together a plan for collective action against management. So I'll pass it over to Wes for the next question.
All right, absolutely. All right, so the next question is, why is this important for socialists fighting for housing justice? So in other words, why is it important that socialists show up for this, for tenant organizing, for housing justice?
This is Aggie, and I would say it's if we're promoting working class issues, this is a very central one, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to housing justice, right, you don't forget your place in the class structure as a tenant, right? You're constantly reminded of it because you pay rent every month. And you live in a unit that's not yours. You are reminded of this relationship almost every day. Does anyone else have other answers?
I got one, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I think from my perspective, I think housing is one of the biggest barriers to the working class exacting its power as a political constituency. And so addressing that need, helping to alleviate that barrier is going to be one of the most important ways that we get them mobilized to attack other issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great answer.
Should we
All
move
right.
to the next one, or?
Yeah. Yeah. So we have, the central contradiction in housing under capitalism is the interest of the tenants and the interest of the landlord. As long as as housing exists as a commodity rather than material right, and the interests of landlords, the one served by the state, then the interests of tenants will always be subordinate to the landlords. Like I said, people are always reminded of their relation compared to the landlord, especially, and I'm sure everyone's had it, when there's bad service provided by property managers or landlords, and you're reminded that these people don't serve you. These people actually, quite the other way around, you are sort of at their will. And so that sort of reinforces and constantly reminds you of that class relation. And you're right, Michael, it's one of those central things, right? You can't organize, you can't go into other fights unless you take care of what's going on at home first, right? I mean, I'm sure everyone has run into people who say, I'd love to show up, but I need someone to take care of my kids. But there is a flip side to that, and I will get to that in just a second. Jerry?
Sure. All right. So the only way out of this relationship is a tenant-led movement to decommodify housing. In other words, as long as housing exists as a commodity, and as long as the interests of tenants are subordinate to landlords, our current situation in housing and all the crises that emerge from it, whether it's people being priced out of their neighborhoods, gentrification, worsening conditions, rising rents, all of those features are of a profit-first relationship to housing rather than putting people in homes who need homes, which, as we know, like we're about to face in New York with the end of the eviction moratorium. After 2 years of a pandemic, the interests of landlords are about to be served, i.e. customers who haven't been paying their rent, customers meaning tenants, are about to be evicted in order to make room for better paying customers, i.e. residents who have more money. In other words, as long as this is a business, they're going to take care of the bottom line first rather than take care of residents, which is what we're fighting for as socialists, is that
And
people
and
need
Jerry,
housing.
hearing that, it's like that one meme that's like, oh, you guys still have a housing moratorium? Because we
Yeah,
are gone. Like that.
I understand. So if you want to share a little bit of background in Florida, I saw in
That's
in the
I
chat we
love,
had a lot of people coming from Florida. If you want to give a little bit of background.
sure, but I just want to acknowledge Zeeves on Stack real quick.
Oh, sure.
Oh, you meant me. Okay, well, what I was saying is that essentially the slide before, in summary, uh the summary of wait, slide number 4.
This was
Yeah,
the previous
a
slide. Yeah.
summary of this, I would say, is that at present, at present we are in a situation where landlords and property owners they are have a greater ability to advance their political interests and sort of their cause, more than the actual tenants. So we have a situation where the interests of the few are being prioritized over those of the many. And what we seek to do through tenant organizing is to give tenants that the political power that they need, and also the political knowledge that they need to add, to advance their own interest, to act as a counterbalance to what is happening right now. Just as a simplification of that, because I mean, when you are in this and especially for our newer members, when you are in this kind of organization like DSA, you will encounter a lot of, you will encounter a lot of that, of that sort of complicated language, and it helps to, sort of, and summarizing it can actually help.
Sure. All right. Thank you. We'll move on. I'll say that the situation you're describing, where the interests of the few, the wealthy few, are served over the interests of the much less wealthy many. That situation is just called capitalism. I mean, and that's what the capitalist mode of production is what's going to reproduce that relationship over and over and over, generation to generation, until a new socioeconomic order emerges. And as socialists and as Marxists, we're hoping for a post-capitalist socialist socioeconomic order as well.
And just elaborating a little bit on that point, um, when we're dealing with any basic good as a commodity, you see the contradictions and the, quite frankly, the heartlessness of it, right? I would have no idea because it's 74 here, but I'm sure in New York it's pretty cold right now, and with all the homeless people and everything, and you have situations where people are houseless, people don't have sufficient heat, sufficient whatever, and units go empty because they need to keep that value and keep the market price, right, or whatever that is, and that not only affects houseless people, that affects people who just don't have enough money to keep up with rent where they are, and constantly having to move. In a situation like Miami, because of the renting prices, it's almost like this entire city is no longer for people in Miami. And so many of our condos, so many of our apartments are empty because they need to they don't need to, they want to maintain the rental prices. And obviously having restricted supply helps that price.
Sure. I would say as you're getting started with tenant organizing, every tenant that you talk to, I would say, almost invariably, will have some story to share with their situation with housing that is a fragment or a reflection of that current capitalist dynamic. For example, we had like our very first tenant who wrote us a letter against management when we were building the case with Solar on Meadow Lane, a woman named Samara. The letter was just talking about the racist and sexist treatment that she got from the landlord. I mean, we live in a situation where the working class of the United States is very is racialized, and where women face the burden of sexism as well. But her solution was not, I want a property manager who's not as racist or not as sexist. I don't want to live at the permission of another person. I want to live in full dignity because that's what every person should get to live on. And we have it within our productive capacity to provide that. So I just want to, as you're getting started knocking on doors, keep those, take those stories to heart because they're all part of this larger picture. I was bringing you to the next slide. Before we get started talking about the steps, I wanted to ask everyone who's here who showed up for relational tenant organizing to understand the responsibility that they're undertaking as they start knocking on doors and start making relationships with tenants. You're asking to be comrades in a war against landlords on behalf of tenants in an era dominated by capital. Do not take that lightly. You are asking for a lot of responsibility. You are asking to carry a very heavy burden. People's well-being, you're asking them to put at least part of it in your hands. To build powerful political relationships takes time, dedication, and follow through. Do not be discouraged if you do not instantly see results. Any success could be the end result of years of persistence and work. Friends who take 15 years to form a union. You know, this is not like waving a magic wand and hoping that a union emerges at the other end of the wand. This is the result of a lot of years of struggle.
And if I may add real quick to that, one of the added sort of responsibilities when it comes to tenant organizing is um, you are dealing with people who may be very close to houselessness. With the way the housing market is, imagining the prices, plus most places are asking for 2 months rent as security deposit. You can't imagine most Americans have that on hand. If they were to be evicted as a result of somebody's attempt to organize them, right? That's not to say don't do it. Obviously, it's just, you have to be very careful because you are, you know, the stakes are a little bit higher here. A lot of tenant organizing is like labor organizing in ways, but and not to be too, you know, bland about it, but labor organizing, you could get another job, right? Tenant organizing, it's very difficult. I mean, to find another unit if you were evicted, plus to have the eviction on your record and everything, of course. So don't take that lightly. You are dealing with people's lives here.
All right. So with that, we'll get started. So step one is to be prepared. When you start knocking on doors, you do not want to go empty-handed. You want to make sure that if someone on the other side of that door, when you knock, answers and needs help, that you'll be able to provide something for them. One of the easiest things to provide them is a Know Your Rights flyer with information. It'll depend on your local ordinances. It'll depend on what your state government policy is. That's why I'm leaving it a little vague here. I know we have people from Florida, people from New York. It will depend on state and local law, what services are available to them, what agencies have working phones, if I can put Florida a little bit on blast. Rick Scott and DeSantis working very hard to make sure that the phones stay dead, I would say. But you want to make sure that you have information available to provide to people, at the very least, to let them know what their rights are as tenants and what the landlord cannot allow to happen.
And I would also say, on top of having materials ready for the tenants, you should have materials ready for the landlord. As in, if a property manager comes by, you don't want them to see that you have Know Your Rights flyers. So when we visited properties in Miami, we would usually have generic, like, oh, we're registering people to vote kind of flyers, or we're signing people up for, and this is during the eviction moratorium, we're signing people up for the emergency response assistance program, whatever. Having something generic like that can sort of diffuse the situation, right? If you're approached by a property manager and they say, what are you doing? You should have something ready to give them and be like, this is what we're doing. Oh, I'm just like a little whatever, so that they don't either kick you out or just stay on top of you. And I'm sorry, last.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
And on top of that, providing people the materials, part of it is providing people an ear, right? A lot of the times people are in these apartments and they need to vent, right? They, more than often than not, they're dealing with pests, they're dealing with mold, they're dealing with drains that don't, drain properly. And people need to express that sort of frustration. Whenever we went anywhere, we would start by saying, hey, whoever, I just want to ask you about your unit. Is there anything that like concerns you? Is there anything that like, you could tell me about? And more often than not, people would just say, yeah, look at my sink. You want to come in, look at my bathtub. This is disgusting. Why do I live like this? And people are very open if you just want to listen to them. They're super receptive. Exactly. And then that's when you give that Know Your Rights flyer and say, hey, I'm here. You want to talk, we can do something. We can organize. We can, if you have questions, reach out, and things like that.
And I would say importantly, like is written here, have your contact information, where they can reach you guys for follow-up if they have any questions, if they want to send an email to you. Ideally, you'll be following up with them the next day, but if they want to reach out personally and get a hold of you with their personal information, have that available for them on the pamphlet. The other way I think was it we would start the conversation just knocking on the door. Someone answers and says, hey, I'm Joe from Miami Tenants Union. We heard there was a lot of complaints against the landlord. We heard that things were pretty bad here. Is that the case with you? And then usually they'd say, yeah, everything you've been hearing is true. So if you're doing your research and you're starting off at a tenant complex where that conditions are bad, you don't have to say much more than I heard that things are pretty bad here, and people will start telling you their story. Which brings us to showing up. So identify a building in a working class neighborhood where tenants have had issues with management. If you need help, a local legal service might be able to point you in the direction of complexes that have had an uptick in eviction cases. The other thing I didn't have here, there are certain databases that will let you know where people have been moving to. But the main place that I think you'd want to start looking at is where people are being thrown out. Because if the landlord is retaliating in that way, chances are everyone's feeling the heat of it. So you want to do your due diligence, make sure you're showing up at a place where you know the situation is bad. I mean, it's nice to show up to a building and everyone says, no, everything's fine here. That's good for them. But if you're trying to organize tenants, you're trying to organize at the point of contradiction, which is to say where the interests of the tenants are being subordinated by the interests of the landlord.
All right.
Okay, so I'll pass
so-
over to Wes. Sorry.
It's okay. Introduce yourself. The only way to make introductions with people in organizing in life is to actually meet with them. The best way to start the conversation is by letting them know who you are, that you heard that tenants have been having trouble with management, and if you ask them what their issues are. If you are not a resident of the building and you are trying to organize, it is recommended to knock doors in pairs. Some tenants may be hesitant to be trusting of a stranger and might decline to speak with you, even if they are having troubles. Others might be more willing if they believe doing so will lead to relief from their landlord or improvements to their premises. So in my introduction, or in my experience introducing myself and in this space, there's like two parts that I always remember. It's that lending the ear stuff. I guess three. Lend your ear, listen to them, make sure they know you're not with management, of course. A lot of people would be skeptical, like, oh, what are you hearing, blah blah blah. And also make sure you don't seem to I don't know how to say this, non-profity, right? I'm sure a lot of these poor neighborhoods, poor working class neighborhoods, I'm sure we've run into this situation, nonprofit after nonprofit who have come by, tried to give them some sort of assistance, rental assistance, financial assistance, whatever. And then the next day they're gone. And unfortunately, that leaves a lot of damage in the wake, and it leaves a lot of people not willing to trust people that come in and actually want to do socialist actual work and actual organizing. So those are a few things you have to sort of make known in your initial introduction, I think.
I'll say just on that note, we did have a tenant at Meadow Lane who refused us twice, and then on the third time said, I talked to someone, they said that you're not with management. You guys can come in now. In other words, like, he was convinced, like, this is management is sending these people to trick me, basically. And like, I know it sounds paranoid, like, tenants have to always be skeptical of what tactics landlords are trying to employ in order to silence tenants from organizing.
Absolutely. There was a tenant, I had to buy him I didn't have to. I bought him like a lamb roti to ingratiate myself. I had to go and get some West Indian food for him, and he was like, "All right, I guess you're cool." And I'm like, "It's like, okay, man."
All right, so taking down contact information, include their name, email, phone number, and notes on the tenant's situation. I would say use pen and paper if necessary. If it's possible, because this is a common problem with taking down anything by pen and paper. If you can take down the information on a notes app, either on a phone or a tablet, that is preferable because it's going to minimize errors in data entry due to less than good penmanship. I'm using my own penmanship as the example here. I do not have the best penmanship. Ask the tenant if they would be willing to meet with you, and if so, what date and time works best for them. In other words, once you've established that you want to work together on a problem, giving a date set, or at least like a day and a window of time that works for them, concretizes that there's going to be action coming up in the future, basically. In other words, that it doesn't just die on the vine there. And with the Notes app, I'll add, what is it? You can just double check, say, is this, like, this information you gave me, is this correct? And they can double check it themselves. You don't want a situation where a 9 looks like a 4 and then you're calling a number that doesn't exist when you're trying to follow up with somebody. So if it's possible to take it down on a Notes app, that'll also help with data entry because you can just do a simple copy and paste into your spreadsheets afterwards. All right, so I'll pass over to Wes.
All right, so follow up, reach out to the tenant the next day to thank them for talking with you and reconfirm your next steps. Organize a date for a meeting. Tenants should be invited to share their stories and experiences living on their property with organizers, cataloging common severe issues as the meeting takes place. If a lawyer can be present, this is ideal in flagging which issues would be best suited to bringing forward as a case against management. As issues are discussed, synthesize what you have heard from tenants into a plan of action for a concrete campaign that tenants can rally each other around. I want to bring it back to that lawyer part. Tenants, in a lot of situations, right, maybe people get over that initial wariness of you. People still deal with the question of what good is it? What good is it to come together and talk about our issues as a collective and everything, right? I found, obviously, if you have a lawyer there who's willing to listen and lend an ear, people are receptive to that and trust that authority and say, oh, there's a lawyer here, maybe we can do something here. Because you have to remember, most of these tenants are probably still thinking within, non-revolutionary, non-inoculated sort of ideas, right? Maybe we can bring them to court. Maybe we can get a civil suit. And this lawyer is here for us to do that. Now, as time goes on and you inoculate the tenants further, that idea maybe, falls to the wayside with actual organizing, but having an initial lawyer there can really be beneficial. Now, obviously, you're not always going to have a lawyer on hand, or what have you, but anyone with that sort of professional credential can help in this initial building stage.
Just to echo what you were saying about competing thoughts on what should happen. That initial meeting, I would say, if you can get tenants to come to an initial meeting, I think that's when you'll see a lot of the competing ideologies of what should be done about the situation emerge, and people will come from different perspectives. You'll have religious people who will say that we just need to, pray on the situation and hopefully things will get better. You might see some situations of respectability politics emerging of we should just do a beautification campaign of the premises so we can feel good about where we're living. Whereas you're always trying to drive home that we're trying to shift the balance of power away from management and towards tenants. In other words, I guess we could all do those things, but we're trying to put pressure on management at the very minimum to follow through on good conditions and honor their obligation.
And if I could give an example of that, when we were dealing with one of the properties over at River Rentals, we had that situation. We got everyone together and said, obviously the pie in the sky, the North Star is rent strike, right? You had a lot of people who were saying, what do we do? Okay, let's do this. You have to guide people in the right direction. There are going to be people who are like, well, we just need to talk to the commissioner. The commissioner doesn't know what's going on here. He's going to sort this out, whatever. And lo and behold, when that day comes and the commissioner says, I don't care, obviously. I'm not going to get in the way of a landlord-tenant dispute. Um, People have to see that, but obviously people have to organically see that. They have to see that, oh, the commissioner is not going to help us. Oh, going to the town hall is not going to help us. Um, maybe it will. But you have to guide people through these ideas and through the way that they're thinking in the initial. And one of the, I don't want to trail off too much, but like built that initial sort of act of solidarity is, you could build towards having a commissioner, but you could also just say like, okay, all right, in the initial stages and say like, all right, I need everyone in a WhatsApp group, let's watch out for the property manager. If he comes by, just warn everyone, let people know, and start building that sort of solidarity.
Just to echo that point on the commissioner, before we go on to the next slide, we had a situation on Kennedy Avenue in Spring Valley, where there wasn't a lot of interest from electeds in helping the tenants until the tenants started to agitate outside of management's office. And then the state senator sent out social media posts basically to the effect of like, I stand in solidarity with these tenants, like housing justice, et cetera, which is to say they will what is that other meme of the two people fighting and then the one guy smoking in the corner or whatever. Like, the politicians will not help you agitate, but they will take selfies. And like, the one benefit of that is that usually these politicians have large followings on social media, so at least if nothing else, you're getting the word out that there's a situation. I would say that the electeds being on your side will probably follow as a result of agitation and not in place of agitation.
I just want to say Michael's on stack.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to point out along the lines of like differing perspectives that you're going to encounter as you're organizing these communities. One thing that I've come across a couple of times now, some of the more savvy landlords will identify some of the more savvy tenants who know how to like go about getting their way, and they kind of use them as a wedge. So they'll let them kind of have what they want, and they'll be less than subtle about it, because then it signals to the other tenants that, oh, this person's getting special treatment, and it creates that like combative nature between them. And that's something that we've had to inoculate against a couple of times now in a couple of different communities. So that's another thing.
Right. Yeah, not letting people monopolize that space or monopolize those ideas. Absolutely.
So to that point, Michael, so one thing you want to do as tenants are sharing their stories and talking amongst themselves is you want to identify leaders among the tenants. Because to your point, if you're not doing it, you can be sure that the management is doing it. They want to know who the tenants look up to, who they trust, and if they can swing those people to issue, management's position, you can kill off a lot of organizing. So if you're not trying to identify who the leaders are among the tenants, who has the ear and the trust of the tenants, management certainly is. Tenant leaders will not necessarily be the ones who talk the most or have the most to say about what should be done, but will be the people other residents look to most often for leadership and guidance. In other words, you'll have a lot of people who say, no, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. It's not who has the most to say, it's who has the eyes and ears of people when they are speaking. And that's usually the end result of having relationships with these people for 5, 10, however many years, rather than someone who just got there and now has a lot of ideas about what should be done, but doesn't necessarily know the other people in the room. In other words, try to read the dynamics of the room as people are talking as to who people are responding to.
Absolutely. And, almost every complex, you have that thing, you have that exact dynamic. You have one guy who just says, oh, y'all wasting your time, just listen to me. This is what we're going to do, and if you guys show up and do what I'm saying, we're going to do it. And the next day you try to follow up, they're gone. They're nowhere, right? And it happens all the time. You get people who are loud. You get people who are presenting militant and presenting radical. And then when the day comes to just do something as innocent, as simple as let's go down to town hall and make a speech or a grievance, they're not there. That always happens. Every complex, you're gonna have somebody who thinks they're, you know, uh, lawyers who didn't go to school. They read on Wikipedia, this is what we got to do. We got this. That's what they thought. Now on the other side, where I get most leaders of where I can find the most leaders are just mothers and women, right? In general. Uh, Generally, those are the people who are at home taking care of everything. They see the home, they see the conditions, they see the conditions that their children are in, and that drives, the worry, and that drives the need to do something, So it's not always the loudest and the most radical. Sometimes it's just the immigrant, the mother, the whoever it is who's at home. They know what they got to do. They know that they have to do something because their kids can't live like this anymore, and that's your leader right there. Not all the time, but usually.
Right. I would say people will let you know, not in their words, but their actions, that they're serious about organizing. And to the earlier slide about feeling the responsibility of what we're carrying, I don't know that there's any demographic on the planet that carries more of a day-to-day responsibility than mothers. So this would just be one more responsibility that they're carrying on top of many others. People who are willing to show up are very different than the people who are willing to show up, make a speech, and then go home. But the reason we bring this up is that it's important to identify leadership. Is that any campaign for the benefit of tenants will not succeed if it is not led by the tenants themselves. Nobody can do anything for anyone else. And as socialists, our goal is to build worker power and agency, not to sidestep it or treat it as an obstacle to be overcome. In other words, the tenants drive the tenants movement, basically.
Absolutely. And that is so crucial because as tenant organizers, we can't be at a property 24/7. And there are things and there are times when property managers will call the tow truck companies at 10, at 9, whatever, when you're not there. And you'll get a text and say, it looks like a tow truck is circling, what should I do, whatever. And you need those people on the ground ready to do something, to alert their neighbors. There's a tow truck, you need to move your car. uh, and again, this is one of those situations, I don't know the laws in New York or where over there, but any sort of parking space in the apartment or the private property that landlord owns, they can just tow your car there. So that is a big form of retaliation, and that's something that like you need leaders to sort of be on the watch for whenever you do make a campaign public or when it's found out.
All right, so I'll pass Wes. I'll pass this one over to you.
All right. Set concrete goals for your campaign and work with tenant leaders to make sure work is delegated among residents and organizers until the goal of the campaign are met. A campaign by the tenants will be dedicated and carried out by tenants themselves. Non-resident comrades can play a vital role knocking on doors, connecting tenants to legal and political resources, and helping publicize issues tenants are facing. Again, as socialists, we all know this, right? We're guiding the people. We're not, holding their hands and dragging them forward. We're guiding them. We're helping them organize. That's what it is. And those concrete goals are little ways to build solidarity and little ways to lead people there, right? Uh, you know, it's so Carolyn asked, yes, but how to set goals. So those goals are, you have to identify them with your tenants, right? Is your goals, getting the landlords to clean up this place? Is it to drop the eviction charges and move out mutually? Whatever it is, you should have little goals on the way there, right? I think that's always good practice. So let's say you're new to a property, you're just organizing the people, and you say, okay, my goal is to have 3 people who are willing to spend 2 hours every weekday looking out for property managers, or talking to other people. Little goals like that to build solidarity. But when it comes to the big overarching goal, that has to be worked out with the tenants. And we obviously take lead from the tenants, right? We don't want to tell them what their goals are. We want to tell them this is what you can achieve. It looks like based on my understanding of your power, your cohesion, these are the things you can achieve. What do you want to do here? That's sort of how I approach it, basically.
And the goals, the campaigns will be the result of performing an investigation with the tenants and asking them about the conditions, asking them about issues that they're facing. And sometimes you'll find that the lack of collective spirit will be an obstacle in itself to overcome. I can give a concrete example from Meadow Lane. We identified a lot of issues that people were having in common: hot water not being on, neglect, bugs, people being hit with like Mickey Mouse parking fees, trying to get them off the premises, etc. There was enough to organize people on to agitate against management. Our biggest obstacle was that no one wanted to come together. In other words, everyone would meet with us separately. Everyone had a separate issue, but the tenants did not necessarily want to be in a room together, working together. So we had to first identify a way to open up a space where everyone would come together for something. In other words, what's something that the tenants would knock on each other's doors for? And what we identified among all the tenants is that what they were really concerned about day to day is that the kids are playing on cracked pavement and they're playing on dirty roads and they're playing, when there's a wide field in the back that could be used for a playground. So we identified with the tenants that a campaign for a playground for the kids, even if it's not an act of agitation against management, would get tenants knocking on each other's doors. In other words, if you said to people, we have a permit for an engineer's report that says that the soil is non-toxic, and we have a permit, and we have a GoFundMe, what have you, we just need to get the license from from management, will you sign this petition? In other words, what would motivate? What is something that people would get out of bed for? And one thing they would all get out of bed for is the well-being of the kids. Everyone at that premises cares about the well-being of the kids. Does a playground on the premises necessarily antagonize management? No. But it does set up a situation where landlord, because if you build a playground on the premises, property taxes might go up. You'd have a situation where you go to the tenants and say the only thing standing in the way of your kids having a place to play is the landlord. In other words, the only thing that we're waiting on, if you've raised the money for the playground, if you've taken care of the engineer's report, you've taken care of the insurance policy, what have you, the only thing standing in the way of the playground is the landlord. Now the landlord is a villain, a real like day-to-day villain in their minds for something that they really do care about, not something that they've just become accustomed to putting up with. So the campaign for a playground at Meadow Lane, I'm hoping is going to be a live campaign for 2022. Again, that's all dependent on what the tenants are willing to organize for.
We have, I'm sorry, it's Zip, right, on Stack?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was wondering, because I'm in a nascent chapter in northeastern Pennsylvania that's been trying to get a tenant organizing campaign off the ground for like months. And one of the like main things that's I guess people are having problems doing is just simply getting a proper flyer. So I was wondering if I could just if I could see like a sample of the flyers that you guys have, maybe, if that'd be okay.
Yeah, if you drop your contact information in the chat, we can take it down and then we can send you over some sample materials of things. We've been doing food distribution. We've been doing Know Your Rights pamphlets. We've been doing, people letting them know about upcoming meetings, etc. So we can send those over to your email if you'd like to have them.
Okay, I just sent it in the chat. Thank you.
Best of luck.
And I want to address Carolyn's question here. What do you do in a situation in which you set goals with tenants and then they lose momentum? Example, a public housing complex is being considered for RAD conversion. Over the course of 2 years, messaging from management shifts from phase rehab in place to full demolish and build. This is against the backdrop of the pandemic, which has catalyzed formation of tenants unions in the city. Tenant unions begin working with residents, but tenants very quickly moved from expressing desire to organize to being resigned to their fate. Yeah, I mean, this happens a lot, right? And you can obviously understand why it happens, right? If people all of a sudden start hearing you're getting evicted or this place is under development, there's going to be that initial rush, that initial push to change something, you know, because they see something changing, and they see that you're here trying to change something, so they'll initially be very involved. Now, as all sort of things that happen on a whim like that happens, right? Uh, Momentum will die down, and participation will start dying down. It's my honest answer is there is nothing to assure that you can keep that momentum, right? But trying to retain that momentum, making sure and following up with those tenants and your identified leaders, if you have those identified leaders, and making sure you are reaching some solid, concrete, small goals to show that you are achieving victories can be one way to sustain that momentum. In my mind, I think a lot of, and this, you know, in all campaigns, right, people want to see results or they tune out. I think that's part of it. So I would say the best counter to those situations where people are losing momentum is to have tasks that are concrete and reachable and obtainable, and slowly start to gain back that momentum. Obviously, there is no easy answer. There's no clear answer. If I had that answer, I would be a, a just a demigod of an organizer, basically. But it's very difficult, and unfortunately. But Carolyn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so um this situation is kind of a lot. So this I'm just wondering whether anyone's dealt with something similar. There's public housing that was set to be, they first started talking about doing a RAD conversion back in 2019, and this is before I was paying attention to any of this stuff. It was pre-pandemic. It was also, the pandemic was sort of a catalyst for forming a tenants union in this city. And so by the time the tenants union, sort of got wind of what was happening and started talking to residents, things were pretty far along in this process. I think the city had, like just given their approval of the plan or were about to. No one really understood exactly what was happening. Tenants were told various things over the course of 2 years. And, we met with them and with quite a few of them, and they seemed like really determined to, send a letter to the housing authority asking, or really demanding to, negotiate a relocation plan that worked for them and that was more consistent with what they were told initially. However, pretty soon things seemed to fall apart. And when we would talk to tenants, it was very much like, oh, they're going to do, management's going to do what they're going to do. The housing authority is going to do what they're going to do. Like, this doesn't really make a difference. And they were just like really stressed out and focused on what to do with their families. There aren't really a lot of good alternatives in the city. We have a vacancy rate of less than 5%. A lot of the multi-family housing goes to students because this is a college town. And if I can put you on the spot, Sarah, my comrade Sarah, is also, trying to work through the situation. If you have anything to add, but it's very much like, it's really hard because there aren't those leaders. And the people we thought would be leaders are either leaving or, they're elderly and disabled and they have a lot going on, right? They can't be, stressed out about this. At the same time, it's just very concerning the way it all unfolded. There are also 2 other public housing projects that are set to be converted to private housing, Section 8. However, this first one is like going to be fully demolished, and people are going to move away, and they're never going to come back, pretty much, even though they have priority. The other 2 complexes are just going to be like rehab, and presumably people will have an easier time coming back. But it's just like, it almost feels like things are like it's too late for this first complex. But if we could at least get a foothold in and try to help people negotiate better, because it's the same developers for all 3 of these housing projects. And yeah, I hope I'm not rambling too much. I don't know if
Not
you
at
had
all.
feedback or if Sarah wanted to say anything.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was pretty comprehensive. The only thing that that I would add is that, I don't know, we've been trying to organize with them since like July. And as Carolyn mentioned, there were people who were really invested, but then, time went by and they eventually got like 90-day notices in November because it's supposed to be completely empty by the end of February, basically. So they want to start building or demoing in like March. So people got those and got really scared and thought that it was, a legit like eviction notice. And
it wasn't, it didn't have a judge's signature or anything?
Carolyn, you can.
No, it's like, so there's this process they have to go through to tell people they need to leave. So
Okay.
it's a 90-day notice to vacate. And so by February 4th, which is what the notices said, at least the latest round of notices, it's very confusing about whether there were like several rounds of notices or the notices only went out to people in the larger apartments in the 3 or 4 bedrooms after they were able to successfully convince other people to move. It's just, this whole thing has not been transparent. But that basically they need to be out by February 4th. And, after we attended a board meeting and shared some tenant concerns, management started walking that back a bit. And they were like, oh, don't worry if you're not out by February 4th, if you need more time, whatever. I mean, basically though, they just don't want, I guess they don't want a PR nightmare. And also there is no way to convert the public housing into private housing until every single resident from that complex.
So
It's like if even one person is there,
I mean, it sounds
they
like
cannot close
that's
on
a
their
little bit of
finances.
leverage at the very least.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, there was 2 things I heard there that could be leveraged. That, and also you just said, management doesn't want a PR nightmare. Well, what if you give them one?
Right.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, in a situation like that, I think, and I've dealt with a similar situation where we had a whole apartment complex that was basically of squatters, right? And they were going to be removed as soon as they demolished the building. There was literally going to be nothing they could do about it. Well, in that case, right, we can't ignore that social media and the audience, the PR, plays a role and is a party in all of this, right? And we've had situations like that where we record 1 or 2 tenants who want to speak up their mind. We put it on the internet, and maybe that does something, maybe it doesn't, but that is an avenue of change. Unfortunately, in a situation like that where management is being weird with its understanding, and you don't have too much power or cohesion within the tenants, social media could be an avenue to gin up that sort of power, right? Because what people do understand in that sense is that they are tenants or they are people. Maybe management's never going to listen to us, but if they at least see, oh, people are listening to us, maybe that sort of changes their mind and changes their confidence, right? Sometimes And I've had these sort of experiences where we just get interviews from like Spanish news media stations that I've never heard of. Estrella TV, I don't know what that is, but you know, things like that boost people's confidence, or seeing that their Twitter video is getting a lot of likes and shares, you know, helps a lot too. And another thing I'll say about that is, and I'm sure this is all, you know, old news, so I don't want to pretend I'm telling somebody something they already know, but like aldermen, councilmen, whatever, they are more vulnerable to PR and social media, things like that, because they don't have the big platforms of like senators or house reps. If you have a commissioner that's getting 10 likes on a video calling him scum for letting this happen in his district, he's gonna have to respond to that, you know. So you know,
Yeah,
from what
I
I'm hearing,
guess.
I think the social media route is the only viable route to sort of um, put people's confidence
Yeah.
back in, and sort of hurt management
And
just a little bit
I
there.
guess though, like it's really unclear how to do that without tenants, many of whom have moved out or are just weary. Number one. Number two, are older people actually do care? I think that there was a real lack of understanding, and this speaks to the lack of transparency in this process of what relocation would actually be like. So the people who, you know, voted for this, one of whom is still in office and one of whom just transitioned out,
Mhm.
I don't think I don't think anyone fully understood. I'm not even sure the housing authority fully understood
Right.
or even accepts now that like they they were told one thing and it's just not working that way. And the feedback they're getting from tenants who are like super happy with the way things are going is, I mean, I don't know, like that may be true for some people, but like we've spoken to enough people for whom it's definitely not true. Um, but anyway, I guess I don't want to like vilify the older people who are willing to work with us. But I do understand what you're saying about applying pressure. I'm just not sure what that looks like here.
Uh, Usually we would interview tenants and just say, or like let them say their story. And it sounds like you have a lot of tenants who are older, who might not have a place to go, who are confused about their general situation. And all of this is very like sympathetic to outside parties, I think. And of it, and you could coach them on what to say if they trust you, and trust that you're not going, and you know, all that, a little bit of media training and to get their points across correctly, and all of that. But I would basically just say identify those people who can and want to be on camera to do something like that, help them media train a little bit. And you have, you know, with one of the advantages of being in DSA is you have that sort of apparatus. You have that social media apparatus, and you probably have media contacts who could help boost that message. So that would be my general sort of solution to it, or not solution to it, another strategy. I don't want to say that that's going to be.
Sure. I mean, these are tactics we're
Tac-
talking about. I had a
yeah.
question for Carolyn. You said there are residents who are basically like they're not going to be leaving on the date that they're um, ordered to leave.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
there's one resident in particular who's lived at this complex since she was a kid. She grew up there. She's like raised kids and grandkids at this complex. And so we weren't trying to give too much identifying information in the board meeting. We were just like
Sure.
sharing some stories people have told us, but it was really clear like who we were talking about. And after that board meeting, the executive director of the housing authority actually went to go see that tenant and told her verbally that, you know, it's okay if she didn't, you know, that she didn't have to leave until, you know, she found a place that worked for her. And even if she's not out February 4th, like that's okay. And then at the next board meeting we went to, there was like some backing off from that February 4th date. But I think as things get closer to March, because they're really trying to close in the first quarter, if people aren't out, I feel like it's gonna get
And
bad.
that's sort of right. I don't want like tactics that management uh, in any situation uses, right? It's a sort of divide by enticing people with certain solutions kind of thing, right? This happens in tenant organizing, this happens in labor organizing, and say like, you don't want to join that union, we'll give you this and this, whatever. You don't need to fight us for this, whatever. And it's confusing. It confuses people. It demobilizes people. It's all those things. I don't know how to tell people to sometimes hold fast and not let that get to their head, but sometimes it will. But I mean, that sounds like a great story right there. I've raised my kids here. I've raised my grandkids here. This is almost New York heritage and history.
Yeah,
I'd
we
be surprised if
definitely
local
agree.
news didn't want to do a story
Yeah.
with her. I'd be
And the
very
thing
surprised if they
is,
didn't.
so
Mhm.
I don't want to take up too much more time, but we definitely agree, like, this is the story, right? And
Right.
it should be told. But at this point, this person is very much like, I don't know, if you go talk to her, she'll talk to you, but at the same time, she'll say she doesn't want to, like, she doesn't want to do any interview. She doesn't want to, like, have that shared. She just wants to, sit in her chair and relax. And I mean, she's elderly, like, she deserves that. But at the same time, there's this fight in her, and she's not going anywhere until they find her something suitable. So it's just like, well, like, you could be the face of this thing. She doesn't want to be,
Right.
right? So we're kind of just stuck.
It does. I mean, it's like if she's not leaving, if she's basically saying my decision is made, I will not be leaving. I'm staying here. Um, it's
Until they
hard.
find her something, which is
Yeah,
very hard to do where
that's
we
the thing.
live.
Her I mean, she doesn't have a lot of leverage unless she's like saying like I will be in. I will fit. You will physically have to remove me, from the building if you want to go through with construction. They will not demolish the building if she's still in there. If she's determined to still be in there.
Yeah.
It's disappointing here that she doesn't want to be the face of it because she is she has a lot of power in that situation. People would be extremely sympathetic to her story. It would, like I said, it'd be very shocked if local news didn't want to cover something like that. There's no way management would go ahead. They would probably go public as to we're willing to make so and so any offer she wants to make sure she has a nice new place to live, etc. Like they would probably try to make their public display of generosity their PR response, if anything.
And there's no reason she needs to be, you know, the story, right? She could be a story. You could,
Right.
if you have other people who are willing to come forward, and then maybe after that, she comes with it. But if she won't be moved at the current, then you could find other people, I'm sure. But that's generally what I think could be done.
All right, thank you.
Somebody else with their hand up. Zip.
Yeah, I was waiting for a while. So regarding publicity. Uh, oh, the comment about the Karen people. Yeah, well, anyways, what I was saying, yeah, not to be confused with Karen, which is completely different. Remember the difference between Karen and Karen. Anyways, what, yeah, is what I wanted to say was regarding publicity. So you mentioned getting out the story about the tenants. So I mean, we can use social media, but would it also be acceptable, in addition to that, to also submit a story to a local newspaper, for example?
Absolutely. But that's going to be, if you're dealing with older tenants and tenants who might not be as tech savvy, that's the media they probably want the most, right?
Yes, but I was thinking of it mostly as a way of sort of generating additional publicity outside that one community.
Yeah.
To make people more aware of the issue and to look at it into it more and more thoroughly.
Whenever we do something like this, it's any media contact we can get, with any of our local newspapers, our local channel, like news stations. I don't know what they have in New York, but a lot of the times the tenants want to call Help Me Howard, Channel 7.
Well, we have a few local, I mean, we have a few local, I mean, in my area, we have a few local, like, I think papers and also TV stations, and even radio. I think, yeah, we have, I mean, I know we have WNYC, which is NPR. We also have Pix 11, which is a local TV station based in New York City. But no, I mean, I was just interested in sort of the publicity part, how we can make people more aware of the issue and sort of where they're hearing about it more, and they
If
and
you
they
think it's possible, I would say do it, especially if you have those media contacts.
yeah, no, I was just wondering, because I think the more people know about this, by leveraging media, getting people to know more about this, I think this is how we win.
So I'll say the intention of the presentation tonight was to be a 101. We were hoping to do a 201 in February, covering a lot of the topics that like Carolyn and Sarah bringing up. It sounded like, would there be appetite for a 201 level session on retaliation tactics, working with the press, media relations training, keeping momentum going, et cetera. I'm hearing a lot, it sounds like that's where the conversation is going anyway. So I just wanted to make sure that that would be something that people would be interested in. But okay, awesome. Very good. All right. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
I would just want to say one last thing is, if anyone has experience with labor organizing, the playbook is not entirely different, right? It's very similar. I think when we started organizing with Miami Tenants Union, we had a lot of former organizers from Unite Here, a lot of AFL, all these labor unions, and our playbook was basically straight out of Unite Here. So when you have those, it's just a little bit of different tools and a little bit of different strategy because you're dealing with homes and not workplaces. But if you have that background, that can inform your tenant organizing. And maybe you can even identify union members within that complex and try to work it there. But one movement informs the other, right? It's solidarity, it's intersectionality, it's all one struggle.
All right. Any final comments, questions, concerns before we close out? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who showed up here today. I hope that it was informative. If you've never done tenant organizing before, I hope that you at least have a clear picture of how you can get started. And if you're looking ahead to February, we'll talk about mid-stage strategies like media relations, what retaliation tactics to expect, working with lawyers, etc. And I want to say a very special thank you to Wes Chow for being here tonight, joining us all the way from Miami. Last